Hello, this is Module 8, case study for EDL 853. My name is Cody Kaler. A brief summary of the case study. This case study deals in a unique special education situation. Susan Green is hired as a special education teacher in a small cooperative district. She is presented with a case in which Carl Hughes is experiencing some behavioral outburst in class, and his teacher, Mrs. Taylor, has indicated her wish to have him removed and placed in an alternative environment. Susan is tasked with a decision on how to best serve the needs of the student, as well as to ensure the classroom environment in Ms. Taylor's room is one that is conducive for all students to succeed. After meeting with the parents of Carl, she finds out the behavior is most likely coming from a recent divorce of the parents, and Carl is struggling with adapting to this new situation. Category 1, problem identification and analysis. So first off, what do you know? We know that Carl has been identified as having a behavior disorder. We also know that his behavior has mostly been self-abusive before, but is now directing anger towards a teacher. And we also know that his parents are going through an emotional divorce. During the recent IEP meeting, there was some outbursts of emotion with crying and leaving suddenly, among other things. What do you need to know? Whether Carl has received any sort of counseling to help deal with his anger. What level of adult attention is being given to Carl as his family deals with the situation at home. And finally, what is the best course of action for Carl to advance his education while not disrupting others or threatening the classroom teacher? Identify the problem. I believe the problem seems to be a multitude of things affecting Carl's behavior and thus his actions at school. His parents' emotional divorce and a less than recent IEP meeting, given the circumstances of what's going on in his life and his needs as a student. I think that needs to be moved up and rehashed. The plan of action. Based on the information provided in the case study, Mrs. Green should stick to her findings based on the facts within Carl's file and her observations of his current situation. Her plan to remove Carl for short periods of time in order to calm him down is a good one. He has no intellectual functioning problems, so as long as the learning environment is not disrupted for other students, it would be best for him to be included in the regular education classes. It would be best for Carl to have regularly scheduled time to meet with a counselor or social worker to work on his needs from an emotional and behavioral standpoint. As a leader, I would encourage the staff to work together to meet the needs of Carl and all students, whatever those needs may be. If they work together, Carl will be able to get the help he needs and hopefully obtain the best educational experience possible. Resolve issues, category 3. First, the best solution for the case study would be for Mrs. Green to schedule another IEP meeting that works best for all the family and the staff. Carl's education will be a cooperative effort, and it should be treated with the highest of importance. The staff at the school need to find a way to work together to ensure that Carl's needs are met while not disrupting the learning environment of the other students. Carl has no intellectual issues, and his issue seems to only focus on lashing out at himself or adults. The IEP team should work together to make regularly scheduled times for Carl to meet with a counselor and a social worker to work on the issues with his behavior and the teachers as well. It is in his best interest to remain included in the classroom, but he cannot be a disruption to the learning environment for the other students. Category 4, debrief the problem by reflecting. First, thinking, feeling, and valuing. When I read this case study, I was thinking that Carl is the one who's ultimately affected by the whole situation. The divorce, the lashing out in this classroom, among other things. I was feeling bad for him because a lot of what is going on in his life is outside of his control. But at the same time, I value the classroom environment, and that needs to be a safe environment above all else. Lastly, Carl within the classroom has not been safe. Carl is in need of additional help to combat his behavior issues and emotional needs that are causing him to behave poorly. The unresolved issues in this case, one of the biggest unresolved issues in this case would be to determine what resources could we employ to help Carl. Can his parents find a way to work together for Carl and his needs? And then lastly, can the staff work together to identify a possible plan to help Carl and his behavioral issues so that he can receive the best educational experience possible? Category 5, reflecting on standard 2. Carl will be removed from class to a resource room if he continues to disrupt the learning environment for the rest of the class until he is able to calm down. Carl has only shown violence and disruption towards either himself or the staff, but his behavior would not be tolerated in either circumstance to ensure the safety and the well-being of all students. Finally, the goal would be to keep Carl included in the regular education classroom and allow him to receive structured help outside of his class time to work on his behavior and emotional needs. Removal to a resource room would occur if he disrupted the instruction of the other students in the classroom. Category 5, Component 1. The learning environment would be kept inclusive as possible until a need for a change was necessary. If Carl happened to disrupt the learning environment and in turn impact the academic success of not only himself, but other students, he'd be removed to either a resource room or to the counselor's office. If Carl is able to attend regularly structured meetings with a counselor or social worker, the hope would be that the emotional outbursts and behavior issues would begin to become a non-issue. Carl's violence is listed as strictly being directed either towards himself or to the teacher. However, any violence whatsoever will not be tolerated in an education setting. The first goal of the school and the classroom is the safety and well-being of its students. Next, the inclusion will continue until the safety or the quality of instruction begins to suffer as a result of Carl and his needs. At that time, removal would be necessary. Lastly, the environment must be conducive for all students to reach the highest instructional capacity possible, with their safety at the forefront. Category 5, Component 3. As the school leader, I would enhance the instructional capacity by utilizing my resources to benefit not only Carl, but all students and staff. I would first organize an IEP or meeting on Carl's behalf that works well for all stakeholders to be present and engaged in finding the best plan for Carl. I would then ensure that Carl's needs are met from both an emotional or behavioral standpoint as well as an educational standpoint. I would finally ensure that procedures are in place as to not disrupt the learning environment of all students if Carl were to regress and need to be removed to meet his needs in an alternative environment. Thank you.